Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to be talking about agreements which are cash for keys. Now apparently, according to a couple of articles I've read, there are numbers that have been reported as 5,000 different agreements have been filed with the city between 2019 and 2023, which is for an average amount of $25,000. Now, if you're not unaware of what cash for keys are, these are deals which are offered by landlords to tenants in rent-controlled apartments. So in LA, there are areas where you have rent-controlled buildings. That means that the landlords can only increase the rent to the tenants in those units by a small fraction, and it is up to that tenant when they leave the property. They cannot really be evicted without it going through an insanely long process to actually do it, which could cost tens of thousands of dollars. The only kind of workarounds or reasons that I've seen previously is that the landlord is going to move into the building themselves. So they're actually going to live there in the building and effectively take over the unit. That is what somehow a way that rent-controlled tenants can be removed from a building. However, what we're seeing more and more, and what we have seen in the last few years, and apparently 5,000 different transactions now, is this situation cash for keys, where a landlord turns around to the tenants and says, here is a lump sum amount of money, and I'm going to pay you this just to vacate the unit. Now you'd say, why would that be the situation? Why would a landlord offer that much money to an actual to a tenant to leave their own building? It is the case often that these tenants have been in here for years and years and years, which means that the actual rent that this landlord is getting for that unit is significantly lower than what the market rate is going to be, or even kind of what it costs them to maintain the unit. So therefore, it is kind of a quick win-win situation where a landlord can get the unit back to either rent it at that condition or to do something else with it, whether it's develop the building, have another kind of term of use for it. But it is something that we're seeing more and more. And so apparently between 2019 and 2023, it was 5,000 different agreements. These agreements came in that had to be registered with the city after 2017. That came from some lobbying groups from tenant representatives that were saying that these situations were happening more and more, and it wasn't necessarily done in the tenant's best interest. So it was something that had to be filed with the city to kind of show that this was going forward. A lot of these buildings that are rent controlled were buildings built prior to 1978. So you see less and less of these buildings being rent controlled coming up, but it is some of the affordable housing that we have in LA, or very little affordable housing that we have, that comprises some of it. You cannot just kind of move out and then, find a friend to replace it and make them the tenant. But what you do end up seeing quite a bit, and I've actually had friends and colleagues who have done this, is subletting of these units. So you have a rent-controlled apartment and you are paying, say, $2,000 a month for that rent. You can then turn around, or you're not supposed to, but it tends to be very easy for a tenant to turn around and say, oh, hold on a second, I'm actually going to move out for a little bit, not tell anyone, but I'm going to rent it to you for $4,000. So they're pocketing $2,000 a month, even though it's not their property, they're subletting it on. So that's obviously a weird situation that should not be going on, and it is something that we see quite often in Los Angeles. So that's a weird one. The other thing that I have to say is that the cost of living in LA is very, very high. And so you may say, hey, why wouldn't a tenant take this this cash offer from a landlord? Well, the reason normally is that cash offer can be great in the short term. However, if your rent or the place that you find to rent in a similar area is significantly more expensive, that money goes away very quickly. And so if you're moving out of LA, you're moving to a more affordable area, maybe it makes sense. If the amount of money is significant to be at that level where it makes sense, that could be the situation. However, I can imagine there are a lot of tenants that turn around and reject these offers. So apparently the average buyout in these deals was $24,704. And that was more than 200 buyouts were for less than $5,000 in this 5,000 amount. So a significant amount of money, while 35 of the buyouts apparently exceeded $100,000. So the total rent paid to these tenants, these 4,869 tenants, 5,000 tenants, was $11.3 million, and that's over the last 4 years. So it's a pretty odd situation that goes on in LA real estate. So I thought actually I'd bring it up. I didn't realize the volume of transaction was that high. However, what some of these tenant representative groups have said that it is far and away a lot smaller amount that is declared than actually is what is going on. They say a lot of these landlords are not filing these suits with the city, and they're kind of going about it in a knock on the door, here's some money, please leave situation, which I can imagine is the case. I don't know if this is a small percentage of that, but I would say that definitely is something that's going to be going on. And they also say that in those situations, that after rejecting an offer, if a tenant does that, there can be a situation where they are almost being harassed to try and get, whether it's not maintaining their unit, maybe it's, a whole myriad of other things, but they can be forced out of that situation, other means, or forced to take that deal. So when you look at a whole picture like that, a landlord would be happy, this is a quote from them, to to pay an offer of $30,000 to $40,000, especially after the pandemic, where we've seen quite a few tenants have not paid their rent, and it is very difficult to evict a tenant in LA. So a landlord may well say, look, I'll forgive you that rent you haven't paid me, plus I'll pay you X amount of money just so that I can get another tenant in who's going to pay the rent and is actually going to probably pay me more each month. So I thought this was an interesting topic, guys. It's probably something that I would see continue to increase over the next few years, but as those amount of rent control units come down, it may be something that we kind of see tail off. I think it's going to be dependent building to building and situation to situation, whether the new tenant that comes in is also going to be protected by rent control. Therefore, the landlord gets the current market rate. However, in 3-4 years, if current costs seem to be going where they're going, it may not be that is at the market rate of the time. So it's almost like a never-ending cycle having to do this. Anyway, guys, I'd love to know your thoughts. I'd love to know if you found this interesting. I'll be back tomorrow with another video, and I hope you're great wherever you are. See you soon. Goodbye.